Let's talk about the big hurdle that I know everyone is anxious about. How do we get an offer accepted? We're one of 20, we're one of 30, we're one of 8, whatever it is. How do we get that offer accepted? Well, first of all, let me tell you, that's not always the case. Even last year, when we were experiencing record highs in terms of pricing and competition, I had someone who offered 546,000 over asking. They got the offer accepted. And I had someone who got an offer accepted 100,000 under asking, and they got the offer accepted. So anything is possible. When it comes to negotiations, the person who has the most options is the person who has the most negotiating power. So always remember that. Even if you are submitting an offer in a competitive situation, but you're not, you have your max, you have your conviction, then you have options. You have other homes. If you have your heart set on that one home that's super competitive, the seller is going to have the options. And we're going to do things to mitigate our risk as an alternative. Now, when it's not a competitive situation, there's kind of a natural give and take. We might concede on this in order to get this. But when you think about an offer, think about what goes into it. So there's 3 main things. It's your price, it's your time, meaning when you're going to close and when you're going to execute on the purchase and sale and other contracts, and your terms, meaning your financing and your inspection. So let's start with price. When it comes to price, we don't just throw things at the wall and say, okay, well, this property went for 50 over. Let's just try 50 over for this. It really depends on what that property is, where it's starting at. And we still consider comparable sales, even when it's a rising environment. And then you do additional research to get an understanding of, okay, well, this is a similar home. Offer was accepted in a competitive situation last week. How does that compare for what's going on with this particular property? Did this property start too high? If they started too high, they're not going to get as much. So I have a lot of people ask me, in general, how much over asking are you seeing in this particular market? And I can provide that data point, but it's not necessarily relevant because we really want to look more at what is the trading value of, a 4-bedroom home in Melrose, versus what is what are homes going for over asking. So I'm just going to throw that number over it. And then when the property's been on the market in my opinion, if the property's been on the market for more than 2 weeks in this market, we're going under, because this is a fast market. And if it's on there for sometimes there's always special circumstances, but if it didn't sell at the open house, then in my opinion, they're not getting asking. They might not get a ton under asking, but that's when we start to have a little bit more negotiating power when it comes to price. Now, your timing, this is an interesting one and usually is low risk depending on your situation. So for those of you who have mortgage and rent, remember that you pay your mortgage in arrears. So if you're worried about having double payments, you pay your mortgage in arrears. So for example, what that means is March is coming up. So if you're a renter, you're going to pay March rent on March 1st. If you own your home, you actually pay your March mortgage April 1st. So what this means practically is that you could close March 1 to March 31st, but you're not paying your first mortgage payment until May 1. So that helps buyers be a little bit more flexible with their closing and perhaps offer sellers more time if they need it, or even, give yourself a month of no payments or an easier move-in timeline. So it's just important, if you can, be nimble with your closing date. Work with a lender who can close in 30 days from the offer. And if you can, be flexible and be able to provide a little bit more time. It might be short-term pain for long-term gain if you have to move in with your mom for a few weeks or something. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Although I had to move in with my parents while we were doing some major renovations on our current home. And, I struggled at first, and then towards the end, I didn't want to leave. I was getting very used to having my breakfast and lunch and dinner made for me. So it's not always so bad. So, and then the final one is your terms. So these are your contingencies. Now we can get creative with an inspection contingency. to protect you and your ability to walk away. That's the most important part of inspection for contingency, is that you can walk. And also communicate to the sellers that, we're going to be reasonable, because the sellers are thinking this inspection is a pain. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to provide them any more money. I already have this much money. I want to know that I have that much money. Not that that's right or fair, but in the seller's market, these are some of the mentalities that we experience. And so we can be creative in that way. Now, what we're seeing a lot when it comes to financing are people adding language of appraisal gap language. So we are seeing people waive financing. I do not recommend that unless you truly have cash to back the purchase price. You're taking on a lot of risk otherwise. But we are seeing some people saying, look, if the appraisal doesn't come in at the right number for this purchase price, I'm willing to make up the difference. Now, if you're putting 20% down, you can restructure the loan and make up less of it. So it's not always the full difference. It's complicated. So I don't want to bog us down too much with that. Yes, that can be powerful. If you cannot afford that, we don't have to do that to get an offer accepted. There's other ways we communicate the benefit of our offer without doing that. Now, if we're competing with people who have done that and we're not winning in other ways, we're not we don't have the better price, we don't have the better timing, we don't have the better, you're not a better financing profile, so look at that too, then we're going to have more trouble. But you have to think about the entirety of the offer. So I see that there are a lot of questions. I want to make sure I leave time for questions, but I'll leave you with this in terms of some advice when it comes to negotiating. So we never know who's on the other side, and negotiating is not about keeping score. It's not a tit for tat. We really need each other to come together. So if someone digs in their heels about this and you want to retaliate, then it could become this really stressful situation where you're getting bogged down in things that aren't worth it. So focus on the forest and forget about the trees. Our end goal is finding the property that you like, that you can afford, that you're going to be happy in. And if someone is, not a man or woman for others like we are, then we're going to rise above it and also make sure that you maintain, being protected in the situation. The other thing I'll say to you is that you're probably going to lose some properties along the way. It's the nature of the beast in this market. But the one you end up with, and this happens for every single one of my clients, and I promise you it's true, you have no regrets. You're grateful you lost the other ones. You always end up with the right one, and everything always works out to be the way it's supposed to. So I know that sounds a little Pollyanna-ish, but I'm telling you right now, it is my experience. So with that,